Thank you so much for having me. I have 15 minutes. I will really try to keep this quite short and be happy to answer all your questions afterwards if you have some. I have actually been very happy to work with some or quite many of the startups that WSI have helped build their hardwares and the communication solutions over the years. So I am Stina. I am the program lead of a national program called Ignite Sweden. And when we find a problem, we always say there's a startup for that. That's what we do. We are focusing on helping Swedish, specifically startups, to actually find customers and validate their products much, much faster, to find the right market and to scale together with customers as well. We are very much focused on supporting the startup because a small company can often have a quite difficult time to create value-based business together with large companies, right? So this is what we do, and we do it all over Sweden. We're a team of 16 people at the moment. None of them, or we're only 4 that are actually full-time in this. Most of them are actually sitting out in incubators, very close connected to the startup community all over Sweden, which is one of the keys. And I would also say that we are non-profit. We are partly funded by the incubation system in Sweden. They are really closely connected to the universities. So the technology companies we work with, they are quite early stage, and they're just about to start finding the partners to scale. But the technology is often based on research from many, many years back at universities and so on. These are some of the companies that we have been working with the last 3 years. So it's a quite impressive list, right? But I would like to tie back here to something that you said in your presentation. Always find the problem. So when we look at the startups and what they want, when we started out this, and we started to plan this a couple of years ago, we saw from the community side that works with startups, there was a lot of money going around in the startup community. But the number of that money coming from actual potential customers in Sweden was quite low. We took a benchmark from Silicon Valley. And as a Swedish person, you always look up to Silicon Valley when it comes to startups, right? So the number of the money in startups, in the startup ecosystem, coming from larger companies, the percentage was 30% or more in Silicon Valley. What do you think we found here? A guess. 70. Whoa. 3 to 5. That's actually correct. And that tells you about 2 things. One thing it tells you about is that the larger companies are not that very good at taking advantage of this fantastic innovation scene that we have in Sweden, right? The other thing it tells us is also that the startups are built on a lot of money that maybe not be there when times are changing, right? So we're kind of entering a bubble again, just like 16, 17 years back. So there was a lot of money in the system, but it was really not that much customer money. So the interesting part then is that when we started to reach out to all of these corporates and say, hey, you need to make more business with startups. You can't only look at them or meet them on pitching events and so on. They were like, but they only want investments from us. So that was like the first obstacle that we met when we started out and tried to do this. So what we did was going out actually to the startups and say, hey, what do you really want from a big company? And this is the wish list. So as a startup today, the first of all that you want with a larger company is to develop the strategic partnerships, to find a partner to scale with. And of course, accessing new markets. And of course, they want the company to be the customer and not the investor. This was actually took quite some time to make the larger companies understand this. And on the other hand, when we went out to the corporates and asked kind of the same questions, if you do want to work with a startup, what is your cause and what do you want to solve? Then the explore new technologies is of course the first top priority. But when we look at the second two ones, you can see that they are quite similar. The large companies needed to build a more innovative culture internally. So that was their focus. Does these two equals? Doesn't, right? No, it doesn't bring money on the table and it doesn't mean business for the startups. So then we started, and just like I added this picture actually just now during Jan's talk, because what we realized that, okay, we need to find the problem. Of course, all of these corporates, they have very specific challenges that they need to solve. If we can find those challenges, then we probably might be able to open doors for the right startups to solve these challenges, and then it would probably be another story. So this is exactly what we do. When we start working with a larger company, we always find the real problems. And the problems aren't that very techy, I would say. It's on a business level, most of the time. We want to develop this because we believe that this is a very important new market for us. Or we want to cut, we want to be more efficient in this part, because then we can earn a lot of money. It always comes down to the business case. So it's very business driven. And when we started to ask all of these questions, what is actually your biggest challenges? If you cluster all of these interviews that we have done with all of these companies, this is what you find. It's digitalization, basically. And that's also probably why things are going quite well for WSI here. This is still the major shift, and this is still the major change that we see happening. And we can also see that not at all the projects that springs out of what we do is leading up to success if you haven't focused on the business case. But adding the digital layers to be closer to the customers, so trying to understand the customers and bring new value business models. This is exactly what the cases that we see from Ignite is all about. I'm going to show you. This is my favorite quote, by the way. And I think this is also a very good connection to what Jan said earlier, that you really need to cut the cost for experimentation. Because if you can cut the cost for experimentation, then you can do more experiments, which will also lead you to success, because all experiments will never succeed. So, we've also been working with FLIR, and this is a match that we made 2 years ago, I think. We sat down with FLIR, and it was just when they have launched their new hardware device that was kind of cheap, actually. So it enabled almost any, industrial player to buy this kind of device to their employees, to measure thermal heat imaging in the production line. The problem was then, you took the image and said, wow, that looks kind of cool, but what does it mean? You have to be quite professional and knowledgeable to actually analyze those kind of images and to understand what the image say to you. How dangerously warm is this very yellow part? You don't have a clue, right? So by adding, they met Gemit that had a very interesting data UX interface. So we can practically add any data and get very tangible graphs and such things back from you in real time, actually. But Gemit had only worked with water management before. So when I called Gemit and said, hey, you should meet FLIR because they need to translate all these images to something tangible, to the operators. He said, no, forget about it. That's not even going to happen. I said, yes, but please, take a shot. And now they together have a new product that they launched worldwide. And this brought not only worldwide business for Gemit, but also a new business model for hardware, FLIR. So they actually sell this as a monthly service, basically. So this is some of the things that can happen when you actually mix these very fast startups together with a... FLIR is not old-fashioned, but it's a superior hardware company. Yeah, and this took, they had a first pilot test run in a couple of months only. This is another quite interesting case, and I think many of you that were at your event last time heard from Econom yourself. I met Econom when they were 3 people actually in the team. That was almost 3 years ago now. And we have just met Alfa Laval, and Alfa Laval said, okay, we have a huge problem. Maintenance costs. We have an extreme problem with our maintenance costs. If we can find some things that could cut these costs, even by a half percentage, that would mean the world to us. Okay, interesting. And then Econom came and said, hey, we have this AI on the edge idea that we would like to find a first customer for. This is interesting. So you can make Alfa Laval's heat exchangers actually talk and call for service when needed. Probably. Let's try it. Okay, good. So we put them together. And now Econom's small program runs on every new heat exchanger that Alfa Laval ships into the world. That's quite interesting. And this took, the first pilot tests only took a couple of months. So experiment fast. This is really the key to succeed in this. And I really loved what you said. If it's already invented, especially by a Swedish startup, use that instead of building your own. Right? So, I think that was all for me now. Maybe you're a little bit curious to hear about how many of these cases we have now. I need to take my brag time, right? Yeah. So we started in first year, 2017, 10. Next year, 44. And this year, we're here. So 101 of these types of collaborations that have sprung off of the Ignite program. Thank you.